Hello everyone, Floppy Waffle 69 here, and welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are concluding our down the line series of the German heavier cruiser line, or the Panzerschiff line, whatever you wish to call it. This is the Tier 10 Prinz Adalbert. This is the crowning jewel of that branch, which this branch is solely focused on the manual control of your secondary batteries. It's been a journey. That's for sure. It has been a journey. There's been a couple sore spots and a lot of positives overall about the line. But work our way finally to the Tier 10, what can I say about the Tier 10, guys? This ship is strong. And the ship is a blast. And that goes up and down the line. Each individual ship has taught us a little bit of something, how to play this line, how continuously play this line. And overall, I'm very satisfied with this line. Now, right out of the gates, I would recommend this line to more veteran level players rather than entry level or beginner players. And the reason is for that is sometimes it can be overwhelming to switch back from manual control to letting your secondaries fire by themselves automatically and then switch back to manual, then control your guns and just a lot of different stuff, right? It could be overwhelming to a lot of players. So that's why I highly recommend that this ship or this line is maybe your 4th or 5th cruiser line to play or to do down the road. But what do I think about the Prinz Adalbert as a ship? Well, I already stated that it's very strong, and I do stand by that statement. But there are some little tiny quirks that are changed throughout the line. And it started more with the Manteuffel down at Tier 9 is I believe your rear turrets can turn 360. And your secondary battering firing angles are better. And your turrets are actually displaced now like 2 in the front, 1 in the back, rather than the line we usually had 1 in the front, 1 in the back. Kind of like your Graf Spee sort of turret arrangement, right? Which is awesome. It means we don't theoretically have to show our broadside to utilize all of our firepower. Of course, you can, but then again, you are being susceptible or are making yourself susceptible to Citadel damage and or taking Citadels in general. So these are all things we're going to cover in this down the line video. We're going to try to go in as much depth as possible, as this is the Tier 10. You have worked your way up all the way up to Tier 10. And the big question I see with a lot of players, well, is it worth it? And that's kind of the end goal, right? Is everyone wants to know, is the Tier 10 worth it? You're putting all this time, resources, money, whatever it is, in order to get to this point. Well, it better be damn worth it to work your way all the way up the tech tree to get it, right? Short answer, guys, yes, this ship is 100% worth it. I can't recommend this ship enough, and it is currently pretty damn strong. But I do want to address one thing that I see a lot of players kind of say, oh, this ship is overpowered. Oh, this ship dominates. And a lot of other YouTubers are saying this too. Oh, look at this, look at this. These ships are strong, but they're not as strong as you think they are. These ships require really good map awareness and game knowledge to really make work. I've seen a lot of, let's just say, not so good players attempt to play these ships and have really failed to achieve much other than throwing their ship away early and all their HP. And then as the game progresses, they really can't do much because they're so low on HP, right? It's a big mistake. It's a big thing I've seen from a lot of players. So you have to keep it in mind. You have to pick your spots before you go ahead and utilize those secondary batteries. Okay? Just because I'm a secondary focused ship doesn't mean, guys, I need to utilize my secondaries so early on in the game. Okay? I understand the strength of this ship comes when it is close, like in close and personal within that secondary range. But if you get yourself in close and you find yourself outnumbered severely with no help, you're going to be dead quickly. At the end of the day, you are still just a cruiser. You only have cruiser levels of armor. And speaking of armor, we're going to go ahead and get into this review and looking at that armor right now. 27mm nose, 27mm ass, we have this 30mm deck with a side plating of armor belt of 100mm. Now, I want to talk about this in the beginning. I talked about this in my Manteuffel review, and it's going to go and follow into the Prinz Adalbert, okay? This is something you see with like the Siegfried, the A gear, the Manteuffel, the Admiral Schroeder. 27mm nose, big nose, good as it can't get overmatched by 380mm guns, but once you get into those 406s, those 457s, and God forbid 460s, it can go ahead and go right through your nose like a hot knife through butter and Citadel the living shit out of you. This is a problem we've seen with a lot of higher tier German cruisers that don't have the icebreakers, as this Prinz Albert, as you can see, doesn't have one. Big targets shoot at and not really that hard to pinpoint and hit reliably, okay? So keep that in mind when pushing in or running away. You want to make sure you show a slight angle to hopefully have those ricochets happen at that 30 degrees auto bounce angles, okay? 30mm deck, it's good as it can't get overmatched by 406s, but right when you get to those 420s, those 431s from the Republique, and or those 457s that a lot of battleships seem to have nowadays, they can go right through this and overmatch that considerably. Another thing to keep in mind is this armor belt. 100mm is awesome. It's a double-edged sword, though, because I mentioned this in my Manteuffel review. If you angle your ship appropriately, you can go ahead and get those auto ricochets because your 100mm is thick enough to bounce a lot of shells. But if you find yourself showing a little bit too much broadside, it's just going to absorb and eat full pens for days, guys. So you're going to have to be careful. These ships are really going to be heavily reliant on your game knowledge to know if I'm angled or if I'm not and who am I fighting. These ships are going to test you, okay? And the last thing is this right here, the infamous German shell catcher. This will count as full pens if they hit there, and I talked about it in my Manteuffel review down at tier 9. I found myself when I'm in kited situations, a lot of battleships are doing considerable amounts of damage to me because they were hitting right here. So keep that in mind when kiting away from your enemies. Okay, survivability is 63,900, and we go ahead and have and pick up that 37% torpedo protection or damage reduction, which is actually not bad for a cruiser. I'll definitely take that given the fact that I think the prior ships only had around like the 20s, like low 20s, mid 20s in regards of their torpedo protection. Going into the artillery, 3x3 350mm guns. That is awesome. The armor piercing can go ahead and overmatch, I believe, 24mm of effective armor, which is also nice. So you better watch out, super lights, looking at you, Smolensk, Mino, Kober, Austin, etc. These guns do reload in 27 seconds and have a 180-degree turn time of 30 seconds as well. Keep that in mind, though. Your gun firing angles aren't that bad. I mean, they're definitely not good, but they're not that bad, guys. And your number 3 turret here can rotate 360 degrees, so you should always have all 9 guns on target at a given time, which is super nice. The range on these guns are 18.2 kilometers, right? And again, I mentioned this in my prior review. Don't get too lost and too caught up in the sigma value of being 2.15. This is probably the more accurate of this line, or the most accurate of this line, just because you have a higher shell count going down range, which is going to translate to theoretical more shells landing on the target. Going down to the high explosive, you're picking up 4,000 damage, or maximum damage, with a 27% fire chance on this ship with an 88mm armor penetration capability. The initial velocity of these shells with the HE and the armor piercing are both going to match each other at 815 meters a second. And then go ahead and pick up that 10,500 damage on these 350mm AP shells as well. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the AP shells because I do find the AP shells to be hit or miss. Not necessarily with the accuracy or the precision of the shells landing where you want them to go. As you know, that's not the best because you're picking up in the third slot the secondary armament modification rather than the aiming systems mod. But they're more inconsistent because the penetration is actually pretty good on these shells. But I do find myself overpenning a lot of cruisers with these rifles. But then every now and then the stars will align and you'll get insane amount of citadels like you saw in my Manteuffel review with the Utrecht getting absolutely devastated. It does happen, but it doesn't happen as frequently as we would like. These guns actually are not bad, and I think if people label these guns bad, I think they're talking more about the inconsistency of the shells rather than what the shells can actually do to the target if the AP cooperates, and we get those juicy citadels rather than over penetrations. That could probably be the most frustrating thing with this thing, is not even the accuracy on the target. It's that if you line up a perfect salvo and you shoot and the shells seem to be going waterline, you'll score over pens every now and then, which is incredibly frustrating, right? We all know that. Now, going into these secondary batteries, we have the 4x3 150 millimeters, and we have the 9x2 128 millimeter guns. The secondaries can reach out at a base to 9 kilometers. I believe automatically they can fire at 12.5 kilometers, which is matching like that of the Schlieffen and your normal secondary BB lines. But if you manually control these, I believe you can get it out to either 13.4 or 13.6 kilometers. I'm not 100% sure, but I know it's around those two number ranges, which again is super nice, right, to reach out to those ranges, especially if you're manually controlling your secondary mounts. Now, I've already talked about this in my Manteuffel review. Depending on what ship you're trying to shoot at those ranges, like for example, like a Marseille or a Kleber, or sorry, Marceau or a Kleber, you might want to let the automated secondaries try to shoot around those 12 to 12.5 kilometer ranges, just because these things are kind of a pain in the ass to lead appropriately, as they seem to be pretty floaty with their initial shell velocity and all that. So, you might want to consider, one of my recommendations would be kind of let the automated secondaries take over at those ranges. But again, if they're pushing into you, or if they're a slow lumbering ship or a larger target that isn't traveling at 55 knot warp speed, absolutely you should be utilizing your manual secondaries. Absolutely. And again, I don't need to tell you how potent these secondaries are on this ship. Your actual secondary DPM is 347, 143. Which, like the Schlieffen, for example, is 384, 930. That's not bad. That's very respectable numbers, but your actual hitting DPM, because you're controlling these and you can control where they're theoretically going, is actually 131,000 compared to the Schlieffen's only 101,000. Okay. Again, depending on the certain ranges that you're at, the automated secondaries are nice because they're going to aim center mass of the ship. But if you get into super close range, like sub 6 kilometers, they're going to be most likely hitting the belt armor, which is doing nothing but shattering, and then you're solely reliant on fires for doing main damage or doing damage for your secondary battery. Whereas the Prinz Adalbert line and the Prinz Adalbert more specifically can aim superstructure and do reliable pen damage with its AG. So again, not bad. And your pen on the ship, on the Prinz Adalbert, is 32 to 38 millimeters, which is awesome. That's the bows of vast majorities of battleships, and you're basically nuking cruisers and destroyers with that penetration. I have melted ships alive with this ship, and I actually think this ship can melt ships quicker with the manual secondaries than like that's of a Libertad. But the Libertad just picking up just raw pen damage, and that range is it's absurd, right? But again, the Libertad is kind of hit or miss if you're going to Citadel it, where the Prinz Adalbert, if you show any amount of broadside, which I'll go back to and showcase because I guess I really didn't do that. Yeah, you can see you're slightly above waterline there. So you have to be careful, especially if you're listing and turning to port or starboard. You can list out of the water and expose more of your Citadel. So please be careful when you're playing these things because you can and will be Citadel. Going into the torpedoes, you have the 2x5 533 millimeter launchers. They are just behind here of that kind of shell catcher. The angles aren't that bad, but you are going to have to expose a little bit of side in order to get these off on target. At least you now have 5 torpedoes going out per launcher, which is nice. Going out to 9.5 kilometers. Doing about 14,400 damage with 65 knots with a detectability range of 1.3 kilometers. This is giving the enemy about a 7.4 second chance to react to these torpedoes. But again, when we live in world of hydroacoustic search, in world of drifting with our Libertads, landing these torpedoes is going to be a little bit harder. Again, if you find yourself in brawling situations, it might behoove you to launch these when you're in closer, when you know you're going to assure the torpedoes to hit, rather than launching them right at 9.5 kilometers and then the ship goes nowhere where you launched your torpedoes. I'm guilty of that. I'm sure a lot of you players are guilty of that as well. It does happen. Patience, Danielson, when you use this ship in regards of its torpedoes. A defense. It's okay. Again, I mentioned this in my previous review on the tier 9 in the line. It's not as good as you would hope. Put it that way, okay? Continuous damage of like 438 millimeters, firing range of 6 kilometers. You will shoot down some planes, but again, it's not going to deter a strike from happening. A tier 8 carrier, on the other hand, though, at the Prinz Adalbert, can deter a carrier. My advice also here in the, what is it, the third consumable slot, you can either use your awesome German hydroacoustic search that goes 6 kilometers, or you could pick up defensive AA. Please do not be that guy that picks up defensive AA because it is useless. Okay, and it's not going to do anything for your ship. Hydroacoustic search is the superior choice for multiple reasons, and because the ship wants to be up in the front line, so to speak. You're going to get more out of your hydroacoustic search than you will ever get out of a defensive AA fire consumable. And because, let's be honest, carrier games aren't, common. Well, I want to say not common, but not 100% guarantee. So if you take defensive AA fire and you don't get a carrier game, well, now it's basically going to be utilized for shooting down either the Guten-Luz or Utrecht's bombers, or shooting down spotter planes and fighters launched by ships. Pretty irrelevant. Don't be that guy. Going into the maneuverability, 33 knots, which is actually not half bad, with a turning circle radius of 900 meters and a rudder shift time stock of 14.1. As you can see, mine is 8.5, and I will go into that in a little bit here, why it is that. And then obviously going into the concealment, obviously I believe stock is 14.7. With the commander upgrade on my build that I will showcase, it comes down to 13.3, I want to say, or 13.2, around those ranges. But yes, it can go lower, but I would highly recommend you don't do that. And this is why. So I'm going to have a look at my upgrades. And as you can see, you're probably like, okay, what's he doing here? And I mentioned this in the tier 9 video with this ship. I take double rudder. I get more out of it because, as you know, these ships can't rely on their armor, especially when we have 5 battleship games a game. You can't rely on your armor enough to mitigate the damage for you, as overmatch is a thing and you will get overmatched, okay? I find myself dodging and being able to dodge torpedoes, dodge enemy incoming salvos, that sort of stuff. It allows for greater survivability, and I get more out of the ship rather than taking a concealment. You could take concealment and get it down to like 12 point whatever, but the problem is once you get it in to like 12 point whatever, you really can't disengage without showcasing your flat broadside and turn in any amount of time, and at that point you're pretty much committed. So there's different play styles. I'm sure people would argue, no, you want to get concealment. For me, I found way more success, greater success, taking that steering gears modification here in that, what is that, the 5th slot, which is going to do a lot for my ship, okay? Everything else here, I would highly recommend. As you know, we're going investing fully into those secondaries, because if you aren't investing fully in those secondaries, really no point in playing the line, as I can get better results from other cruiser lines in game if I'd rather just play a standard, large, heavier cruiser line, okay? I don't want to go too much in the captain build now. I'll talk about that more while we're in battle, but that basically concludes the port analysis of the Prinz Adalbert. I already mentioned some tips and tricks about her, about, letting your automated secondaries take over when you are at the pushing those out, the certain ranges when you're going against those little tiny pesky DDs like Kleber, etc. Maybe you want to let your automated secondaries take over, as your manual secondaries and your aim might not be that good in order to reliably hit the target. But the other tactic I have with this ship is actually, when you find yourself within secondary range, just shoot your damn secondaries at the ship, and inevitably enemy ships will want to turn to try to dish out that amount of pain back to you. That is when you open up with your main battery, and that is when you send them back to port, or do hopefully catastrophic damage to the ship, because they are now flat broadside to you, and you can take full advantage of that. But then again, I also mentioned that the shells, especially the AP, can be incredibly frustrating at times with those overpens, especially on those lighter cruisers. So keep that in mind as well. I don't want to be like, this is what you got to do, this is how you have to play the ship. This is what I do because I find a lot of success with it. But trust me, even with my success, I still have those times when I freaking fully overpenned a Smolensk when he's flat broadside at 10.5 kilometers, just because of my weird AP penetration and fuse times and all that type of stuff. Okay, the shells can be a little bit frustrating. I mean, they are 350s, right? Those are, for cruisers, relatively larger shells. So, but enough blabbering on about what the Prinz Adalbert is and what it's good at and pros and cons and tips and tricks. Let's go ahead and show some gameplay and talk a little bit about her in game. Alrighty, guys. And here we are in battle with our Prinz Adalbert here on what, Land of Fire, whatever this map is called. Not a phenomenal game, but I think this gameplay showcases a lot of the strengths and the weaknesses of the Prince Adalbert. So I definitely that's why I chose this particular gameplay footage to showcase you guys. And it's not gonna be as interesting as like the tier 9, the Mentwaffle. Like obviously that was a really, really good game. For that ship and for me. But this still is a good game, and I definitely didn't want to do it a disservice by not showcasing this gameplay for you guys. So obviously I already showcased the commander build and the upgrades about what this ship, what I've taken on this ship. Again, pretty self-explanatory with the captain build, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Again, as you know, I'm investing fully into those secondaries. That's kind of the bread and butter of the ship. Don't know why you wouldn't do that. And as you can see as well, I opted out of the concealment skill, or sorry, the concealment upgrade for the ship because I wanted to buff my rudder shift time down, and instead I took the captain skill on the captain, or yeah, the captain skill. I took the concealment skill on the captain build, and that, to me, that just helps mitigate some of those weaknesses, and it allows me to get into those advantageous positions. Obviously, in this game, I don't even have concealment expert yet, which kind of bites ass because my concealment is 14.7. That is an ouch. That is a little bit of an ouchies. So please, one thing you need to remind yourself with this line is they're very captain intensive in regards of like having a high level commander. I would say to make these ships work at a minimum, you're going to want a 14-point commander. If you don't have a 14-point commander, you're really kind of doing not only yourself a disservice, but your team as well. Just because again, your battleship levels your detectability, and you're going to be spotted. And again, your playstyle to get in close and personal with these ships is going to be really voided, just because they can see you coming from a mile away, right? But again, we get right into the action here, guys. We are blaring our secondaries at the enemy, and we are going to be pushing these ships. We want to make sure that we can eliminate the Shimakaze, and we can go ahead and push this Z-52 as well, with our Hydra that's going to be popped here any minute or now, especially when the ship, the Z eventually pushes himself back in smokescreen. We want to make sure we can keep on detecting him with that 6-kilometer acquisition range of ships, which is super, super nice, right? But one thing that's worth mentioning about the Prinz Adalbert is the secondary firing angles are not as good as the tier 9s. This is something I noticed, but I think you do pick up more secondary mounts, which is nice. You have overall higher secondary DPM, and more shells going down range, which again is super, super nice. But you will have to show a little bit of side before you can go ahead and start getting them off on target, which isn't a big deal, but it is one thing I noticed when playing this ship is that I was trying to shoot my secondaries when going nose on, and nothing was shooting. So you are going to have to expose a little bit of your broadside. Obviously, here is a prime example of your AP kind of letting you down. Again, we are going against a lightly armored target, Jinan. Right, he's going to be flat broadside, or pretty much flat broadside to us. We're going to go and unleash with our main artillery, and it doesn't do anything other than over penetrations, right? For at least the first salvo. Very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. Like I told you, it is going to happen. And I even made sure to see when he was angled, and we got ricochets, and we only got nothing but overpens, which just sucks because my main thought process was, okay, he's angled. That's going to increase his armor threshold, which is going to allow me to hopefully get citadels and full penetrations. But sadly, I was proven wrong, and he actually didn't do that at all. Which again is pretty scary, especially when you're looking at a heavily involved torpedo cruiser like this. But then again, he angles even more, and finally we go ahead and score those citadel ribbons that we were looking for. So again, please be careful when shooting your main artillery, especially against those pesky light cruisers, as you will be getting a fair amount of overpens. And again, if you're not getting overpens, for some reason I'm getting ricochets on angled sections. So that's just because I'm trying to mitigate that weakness of my AP pen against those lighter cruisers. Again, you probably could do a better job than I did of aiming if you just hit for parts that are flat and not as angled, right? And not hitting their belt armor. So again, the consumable loadout of this ship falls in line with everything that I've already talked about with this line. Pretty much idols or mimics that of the Mentwaffle at tier 9. You have that same 6-kilometer hydroacoustic search. Do not take the defensive A consumable fire because that is just a waste. You'll go ahead and have your heal, which again is a pretty standard heal, 28-second duration, 320 HP a second with total kill about 14 seconds. And then you have your limited or fast damage control team, damage control teams or whatever. You have 4 uses base. So you're going to want to go ahead and pick up that superintendent skill to get you a pop, an extra charge of all your consumables, bringing your grand total up to 5 damage controls, 4 repairs, and 4 hydros as well. Which is nice. This is one of the reasons why I found myself dying when I did, is because I didn't have that extra heal, which eventually led to my demise, and or not having the concealment expert skill right here, because then the rubric is able to pick me up. But I do live because I have those fast acting damage control teams here, which is allowing me to extinguish both those fires that were on my ship. So going ahead and doing the widespread. Again, looking at hindsight, I didn't really need to launch these because I probably would have seen him because he's only, his concealment's 12 point something. Didn't need to launch these, but hey, it made me feel better, and I went ahead and shot those out just in case. Like, they're not the fastest torps in the world, so I was thinking maybe I could have him sail into them because he's, you know, quicker, and my torpedoes are slower, so therefore they meet in the middle. But no, he actually disengaged. But I knew, because he saw my HP pool, he will turn around and try to re-engage me because he thinks I'm an easy kill, which he is sorely mistaken, because I definitely got some fight left in me here, especially when I get my next heal up. Which heals, I think it comes up in about 80 seconds, which again is nice, and I know certain captain skills can go ahead and buff that. For me personally, I didn't think I really needed to. I think the captain build I have laid out is ideal for what this ship can bring. And right now, I think in this game, I only had a 13-point commander, but right now I have an 18-point commander on my ship and time of recording this video, and I can assure you that my captain build is awesome and it's effective. I'm getting really, really good results in my Prinz Adalbert. One thing about the ship, and I mentioned this with the Manteuffel down at tier 9, is you're going to want to hang with your team. And I know right now I'm not. I thank God I'm top tier, and I've already eliminated all the ships here on the flank pretty much. Go figure. But that was because earlier on in the game, I was able to push aggressively with my team and eliminate those 2 destroyers, which was essential for winning the flank. DDs will always win your team games until they don't, because they're a potato and they just die. We have all had teams like that, right? So yeah, you want to support your allies, you want to be up in the fray, and it's good to be aggressive in the ship, but you have to pick your spots. Okay, you have to pick your spots. So going into my final thoughts about the ship, I do love this ship. I love the secondaries on the ship. I love that I can control my secondary battery of the ship. I love the whole package. It's a really, really fun ship. It's a really, really fun line too. And obviously, for me, there was only 1, maybe 2 stinkers in the line, if I'm going to be honest with you guys. But these ships do require a high level or a higher level commander to really work. That's the one thing I've noticed. It's a big downside. So if you only have low level commanders, these ships are going to be a little bit of a struggle bus in the beginning until you get those commanders up, just because they are commander intensive in regards of the level of commander you need to make these ships really be effective on the battlefield. Again, you are still only a cruiser, so you still have to keep that in mind as well, because your armor is cruiser armor, it's not battleship armor, and you still will 100% get overmatched, like you're going to see here against the Ruprecht with his main artillery. So now, to fast forward here a little bit, as we already died, we ended up picking up the victory of this ship, and it's going to take us into the post battle analysis of how I did. Again, this gameplay wasn't there to showcase, oh, look how well I did. Like, this is nothing, 144,000 damage. It's just supposed to show you what the ship can do, the overall concept, and trust me, the results you can get with this ship are freaking incredible. I think we picked up just under 2,000 base XP again, which is nothing special, or just over, whatever. It doesn't really mean anything. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Now go out there and dominate in your Prinz Adalbert, and if you see one on the battlefield, you'll know exactly how to counter them. It's a cruiser, guys. Not that hard. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, guys.